Hi, everyone. I'm Jeannie Walters, and this is another Experience Investigators Ask Me Anything webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about how to develop a customer experience employee education program and really why it matters, especially in today's world. Now, we're so happy to have you here, as always. So, as you join us, please let us know where you're joining us from. If you have questions, drop them in. I am joining from Chicago, where it is very cold today. It's hard to even go outside. And as always, we have our director of marketing, David Hornreich, with us. David, you're in Seattle. What is it like there today?
I'm in Seattle. It is dry, which is pretty impressive. And the thing that I'm holding on to is that the days are getting longer. We're through the worst of it. It's
That's true.
almost daytime. It's almost still sunny at like 5 p.m., which is
I
a,
mean, that's
a really
progress.
important milestone. So
Yes,
just
it
enjoying
is.
those days getting longer and looking forward to spring.
I am right there with you, and I think a lot of people are feeling that way already. So, but I really appreciate that we color coordinated today. That's
Yeah, just
something.
as we planned it.
I mean, that's a good sign, I think. That's a good omen.
It is. It is.
Well, as people join us, they can, of course, drop questions in there. Anything else before we get started?
I don't think so. I think this is an exciting topic. So let's dive right in.
Excellent. All right. Yes, when we're talking about how to develop a customer experience employee education program, we're really talking about ongoing education for every employee in your organization. So we have a lot to cover today. For those of you who I don't know yet, my name is Jeannie Walters. I am CEO and founder of Experience Investigators. We're a consulting firm who help leaders like you develop programs and processes and mindsets to deliver better days for your customers. We also do this through workshops and training and keynotes. And if you haven't already, we love to see you at the blog at experienceinvestigators.com. We also have a weekly letter that we send out just for people like you. So if you would like that, please check that out as well. And that keeps you up to date on all of our events, our partner events, all sorts of things. So check that out when you get a chance. But let's get into today's topic. So first of all, let's talk about why does this matter? Why does CX training matter? Well, when I talk to leaders, a lot of what they tell me is, you know what, people just don't always get it, right? They think they understand customer experience. Maybe they've heard about it, they see it when they have a special event, but then they kind of move on with their lives and they don't see the connection between their daily lives, their efforts as an employee, and customer experience in general and customer experience that is delivered to each customer. When that happens, there's this big disconnect throughout the organization. And then you start hearing things like, you know what? I wish our customer experience were better. I wish customer care did a better job, or I wish customer service did a better job, as if it's only one department's role. Of course, customer experience, when done well, involves everyone in your organization. It is so much more than one product, one service, one department. So, we as leaders have to emphasize this as a learning program throughout the entire employee journey and to make sure that everybody understands why this matters so much. It matters because this is something that is instrumental in actually achieving your business outcomes. This requires everyone in the organization to really understand not just what customer experience is, but what customer experience success at your organization is. What are the expectations customers have? How are they changing? By the way, they're changing very rapidly. So that's another reason to do this. And how can I, as an employee, best deliver on those? What is my role? All of that has to be considered as we look at a program like this. Now, a lot of times the way this is addressed is we have something like a customer experience, training once a year, or we talk about customers during CX day or customer service week. But when we invite people into those programs, a lot of times what's happening is they still are disconnected from much of what's going on. They maybe have never seen actual customer feedback. They've never experienced what it's like to look at those verbatims that some of you have seen on surveys and hear the actual voice of the customer. Sometimes training is really focused on what tools to use, processes, and procedures. Many of you, I'm sure, have sat in on a lot of CRM training to learn how to use those tools, which is very important. But if you don't connect the dots between why are we using those tools, how does that deliver on customer experience success, then it becomes like anything else where it just feels like process, procedure. It's not really emotionally connected to what we're trying to do. And then rarely do people hear about the importance of customer experience when it comes to what they're doing, how the operations are running, product development, marketing, project management, all of those things actually impact the customer experience. So today I'm going to go over 5 things to consider when developing a customer experience employee education program. You'll notice we're using the term employee education instead of just training because this is something that I hope will be ongoing. It's great to work with your learning and development team on this. It's great to partner with your HR team to really make sure that this is something that is part of every employee's journey. So, the first thing, we're going to set customer centric expectations from the first interview or even before. We're going to make sure onboarding processes include customer experience training specifically, not just something we mention, but something we actually educate on. We're going to break out the themes, and I'll talk more about that. Get into those individual roles and responsibilities. How does my role impact customer experience? And then really offer a customer day more than once a year. There are some great examples of this too. So, first of all, start from the beginning. We need to make sure that when people are joining our organization that they understand that this is a customer centric organization. We have certain expectations. So during the interview process or even before, ideally, we want to make sure that our expectations on employees are clear. We want them to consider the customer in decisions they make. We want to recognize that and make sure that when they move forward, they're empowered to think of the customer. We want to let them know that we are going to provide more training for them, more education about customer experience, because that's how important it is to us. It's a priority for us. And in fact, this is a great thing to mention as we're all in this world today of the great reshuffling, the great resignation, whatever you call it. If you are trying to attract certain people to your organization, one of the things that has come out lately, this is from a report from LinkedIn Learning. They found that employees now consider opportunities to learn and grow the top driver of a good work culture. What a great thing to promote as you're posting those jobs, as you're interviewing candidates. Really talk to them about your learning programs. And if they know that they will continue to get customer experience education and how important that is, that might be enticement even to join your firm. And if they're excited about that, that's probably the person you want in that role. So it covers a lot of bases when we're talking about candidate recruitment, hiring, interviewing, all of those things. We also want to recognize, no matter what their role is, we want to make sure that we're recognizing the role that has an impact on the customer experience. So even if they're not customer facing, we want them to know from the beginning that they have an impact on the customer experience. And at our organization, we believe in customer experience success in this way. And so your role, even if you're in the background, even if you're only serving other departments or other employees, that all has an impact on the customer journey. We want them to connect those dots from the beginning. We also want to make sure, speaking of beginning, that the onboarding process and programs includes customer experience training specifically. Now, a lot of onboarding kind of starts aspirationally. It talks about the vision and the values of an organization. And then a lot of onboarding goes into kind of here's how you fill out our forms, here's the process, et cetera, et cetera. All of that is important. What we want to do is make sure that from the beginning, they understand that our values and vision are tied to the customer experience. We also want them to feel empowered to focus on the customer experience. So we recommend including things like, hey, what the heck is customer experience? Because guess what? They might be walking in with a totally different definition and understanding than you want them to understand as part of customer experience success. We also want to inform them about what actions are taken today, about how we gather that feedback from customers, how we understand insights, and take action to continuously improve the customer experience. Now, you won't have to go into great detail with every single employee here, but it's important for them to know that it's a priority and that you are taking the right steps to understand customers and move forward with that. If they don't know that from the beginning, they might be surprised to hear certain things later. Make sure that they're informed about how this is done. And then again, we want to reinforce what is that employee's role in the bigger customer experience picture. Let's make sure we paint the picture of, you know what? By helping us with product innovation, you are helping us with customer experience success. By working in our warehouse, you are helping us with customer experience success. Tie it back to your customer experience mission if you have one, tie it back to your success statement. Make sure they understand this is not just something you talk about. This is something you tie real metrics to, you tie real success outcomes to. So keep talking about those things throughout the employee journey. And then we want to break out the themes. And what I mean by that is sometimes we give a lot of information in the beginning of an experience journey. And we tell them all about the company, we tell them all about their role, we tell them all about all these great things that we do. And then we expect them to just absorb all of it and understand all of it. But if we can really break out different themes for different employees, for different groups, and make it consistent, that's what really causes education to stick. In fact, one of the key traits of a successful work culture is pervasive cultural reminders. This is a great way to do that. There are different ways to do this, but you can do things like use a content calendar and express different themes every month about the customer experience. What does it mean when we gather feedback? What does it mean when we hear from different customers and then act on it? What are the traits of a successful customer experience here? There are all sorts of ways to break this out. You can also do things both strategically and tactically. So maybe you have a month where you're just explaining the dashboard. Here's how to read our customer feedback dashboard. Here's what this means. Where we want to go with it. Maybe you want to show how you gather employee feedback. And part of that is we want to hear your ideas. We want to make sure that we're improving the customer experience based on what you're seeing and your suggestions as well. You also want to talk about your customer's journey. What does it look like end to end? So that that person in that role understands that they play part of this bigger picture. Now, you can do a lot of different things here. One of the things that I like to do is really make sure that you are consistently communicating about customer experience from both kind of that macro level, but also at that departmental level. What are leaders supposed to do with their teams? You can give them topics and ideas and suggestions so that at their team meetings, this is something that they're hearing over and over again. It's not a flavor of the month. And then you really want to get into those individual roles and responsibilities. So each role has unique opportunities to influence the customer experience. I have been to a lot of organizations where the C-suite leaders will ask me something like, you know what can we do to make sure our frontline people are more customer centric? And I start asking lots of questions there. Well, what are they told? What comes from the top? What comes from other organizations and other teams? And if they are siloed, then it's really hard to make those changes because they're hearing mixed messages from the top. If we're only talking about profit, if we're only talking about some of those outcomes, and we're really not talking about customers, that can disconnect people from their role and how they deliver on the customer journey. So work with your different team leaders to see if you can, find what works for them. Now, of course, customer service and customer success, they might already have training plans around service-specific situations, which is great. But then we wanna think about how to really understand, okay, what does this mean for your HR group? How can they understand that what they do with the employee experience has a direct impact on the customer experience? Get creative here. Work with your different teams. You can gamify it. You can share ideas back and forth. And this is something that can be really powerful as you move forward. I've also seen this done with different book clubs, different things like that, where you come together and lunch and learns and various things. But the point is, when you are looking at the org chart, when I, as an employee, I'm looking at my role, I need to understand how my daily efforts connect to the overall customer journey. And I need to know that that's important to our organization. If I only hear about that in my onboarding training, then after a while, it seems like it's not important. We need to reinforce these messages any way we can. We also want to offer a customer day more than once a year. And some organizations are really committed to this with CX Day, which is always the first Tuesday in October. Test me on that. I'm not sure. And that's great if you have a big celebration on CX Day. I totally support that. Sometimes we have a certain day where we say, this is the day to think about the customer, and we share different things. But if we don't do that more than once a year, we're kind of saying, yeah, it's important, sort of. So think about ways that you can really incorporate, how can I stay connected to the customer? Now, there are different ways to do this with one of my favorite examples lately is that DoorDash, which is a food delivery service, they created a We Dash program. And essentially, they ask every single employee, no matter what their role, to deliver a food delivery once a month. Now that stays connected to the customer experience, to the delivery driver experience, all of those different things. They get some pushback on this, but I think it's a great example that this is important to us. We understand that we can't always see the day to day when we are in our offices at our desks. So it's a great example of really saying this is very important to us. You can do this in different ways too. You can create a customer day a month where you can create a customer room where it shows all of the different communication, all of the different challenges. People do this in all sorts of ways. I've seen really creative things. You can do this virtually now as well. You can also, like I said, have a book club or something like that once a month where everybody in the organization is reading a customer-centric book, or maybe it's teams. But either way, it's something that is repeated over and over and over. You can also invite customers in once a month, once a week, whatever, and share those different customer stories. You all have heard me talk about customer experience mission as well. Having mission moments as part of your meetings is another way to bring the customer experience back into this. But essentially, you want to make sure that people are learning about today's customer experience, not always just what's reported about the past. They have to stay connected to what's actually happening. I mean, isn't that a lesson we've all learned in these last few years? The world can change very, very quickly. If we are only relying on those reports that tell us data from the past, we might not be really connected to how can we innovate better for our customers? How can we make sure that our employees are empowered and educated to actually make those improvements, suggest those things on behalf of our customers? So there is so much that you can do with an education program like this. And again, I really encourage you to connect with your learning and development team, with your internal communications team, and just other leaders throughout the organization and say, how can we support the education of you and your team? This is something that we need to think of as part of the employee experience journey. And that's kind of relevant here as we talk about these different things. So set customer-centric expectations from that first interview or even before. Make sure your onboarding programs include this customer experience specific training. Break out the themes, make it a little easier to digest, make sure that people are getting reinforcement of those different topics as they go through their employee journey. Get into those specific roles and responsibilities and how they connect to that customer experience that you're looking for, and then offer a customer day more than once a year. Make sure that you are really reinforcing these messages. We as human beings, we need that reinforcement. There's all sorts of data out there saying how much we need repetitive learning in order to really internalize it. And the goal here is that anybody along their employee journey absolutely understands how important this is, absolutely understands the connection of their role to customer experience. And also, you'll have a common language. You will all know exactly how you're defining customer experience success at your organization so that there's no question that this is more than the customer facing roles. This is about every single person. We are committed to this, and we're going to empower our employees to be a part of this so that we can move forward in the best possible ways on behalf of our customers. There is always so much to learn. I know it can feel really overwhelming. Customer experience is a huge, huge topic. Sometimes I ask different leaders, what are your priorities for customer experience? And 12 people will have 12 different answers because there's always so much to take on. So, this is another reason why it's so important. We want everybody in the organization to hear things again and again and understand what can they take and apply to their roles. Customer experience is a mindset, a strategy, and a business discipline. You want to reinforce that this is not something we're bolting on to the customer journey. This is something that we are talking about because this is how we do business. This is the way we do business, and not just something that is a program or one training or just for those customer facing roles. You want everybody in the organization to understand that this is part of who you are and part of how you do business. So, at this point, I would love to hear from you. What are you doing? What questions do you have? And I'm sure some of you have some great examples and ideas about this too.
Yeah. Well, let's start out with a question that came in from the community earlier this week. It's all about CX buy in. So, this question says, our C suite has added 4 new executives in the past 2 years. How do you make sure that the entire executive team is on board with your CX objectives?
Great question. Yeah, the C-suite is expanding. My favorite example of this is, and I've talked about this before, but the client who had a chief information officer, a chief technology officer, a chief information security officer, and a chief data officer. And so instead of having, the traditional kind of CTO role, they had expanded that. That is happening over and over again. Now we have chief revenue officers, we have chief HR, we have chief learning and development, sometimes all sorts of things. So I think that this is absolutely critical for the CEO to take on, frankly. I think the CEO has to be leading with this message that this is really, really important to us. And as part of onboarding for anybody, talk about that, educate about that, talk about what is the definition here for customer experience success, and then keep talking about it. This is where I think I see the most disconnect. We talk about customer experience as if it's a thing that we should just do, that is just going to happen. But customer experience requires strategy and management and discipline, just like any other part of the business. So if you don't have a chief customer officer or a chief experience officer in that C suite, that's sending a message too. So we need to make sure that the C-suite is built in a way that respects that customer experience is super important. And we need everybody to be in line with that because they're the ones who will be holding others accountable for this type of education, for this type of the outcomes that we're looking for. So it's really important to tie things back to this is who we are, but also this means success. This is what we're doing as a business. So we have something called the customer experience success statement, and that has helped a lot of leaders understand that when we are successful at customer experience, we actually get those business outcomes that we're looking for. And we have a free workbook there that David dropped in. And really, that's about breaking down your organizational roles, your leadership or your organizational goals, I should say, and your leadership goals, and then figuring out, how do we measure success here? How do we know if the customer experience that we're delivering is moving the needle forward, not just in the CX metric, but also in our organizational goals as well? If you're talking like that, that gets people's attention a lot more. So, with that and with ongoing communication, ongoing education, that can be a great way to do it. The other thing is, the C-suite is a great place to start talking about who knows about a customer experience mission moment. How did we live up to that? How did we not live up to that? Every time you have a meeting, you can trade that responsibility around. You can rotate that. So one week the chief revenue officer is responsible for sourcing one of those stories and finding it. One week it might be your chief technology officer. It's amazing when you ask them to connect those dots, they start really emotionally connecting with what's happening day to day with your customers, which is essentially the goal that we want, because humans are not moved by metrics. Humans are moved by emotion. And the only way you can get the C suite to really care is if they really care. And so that means connecting with them emotionally about these customer stories. That was a long answer. There's a lot to say there.
I think it was a great answer, though.
Thank you.
We've had another question from the community that I love because it's taking a perspective that we don't normally take. This question asks, they say, it seems like I have a poor experience with almost every business I deal with, and they don't seem to care. Do you have any advice on how, as a customer, I can provide better feedback to
Mm,
companies? And if we want to flip that, we can also
yeah.
kind of think about how, as companies, can we make it easier for customers to provide the right feedback or the most helpful feedback?
This is such a great question. Uh, so I think this really shines a light on how often feedback is gathered just for the sake of gathering it. And that's very frustrating for everybody. So one of the things I always recommend to organizations is you have to have a feedback strategy. That means you have to know what you're asking, why you're asking, how you're asking, and what you're going to do about it. Because otherwise you're wasting everybody's time. And I think many of us as customers have felt that. We literally are filling out surveys left and right, and we never hear back, and we never see movement. I've literally written in surveys, I know you're not reading this. I've said this 4 times, and that it just feels like you're yelling into a canyon. And so I think part of that is really understanding, if you're creating a feedback strategy, we need to respect the customer's time, and we need to know what the heck we're going to do about it. If we don't have an action plan for really understanding those insights and then acting on them, then it just becomes an exercise of collecting feedback for feedback's sake. And that doesn't do anybody any good. The flip side, the question you originally asked about, how can you provide feedback that's more meaningful? A couple things I want to say there, that it's a little different, but I think it's important. Right now, today, the world we're living in, there are so many customer service issues right now that everything has gone up. The ticket volume in every channel has gone up in almost every industry. That is for a lot of reasons that we're living through right now. But once somebody reaches that customer service agent, or, the representative, a lot of times that representative is working in a place that is short-staffed, where they're not getting what they need, et cetera, et cetera. So one thing I would offer as a customer right now is to have a lot of compassion and empathy and start from there. Because even if you're waiting on hold for 2 hours, that means they've been dealing with all sorts of angry customers for at least that long. And so I think it's really important. Somebody commented on my LinkedIn article recently about this, and I thought it was a great point to start with compassion and empathy. Um, and I would also say, as a customer, if you're not hearing back, if you're not seeing those changes, then I'm not sure there's much you can do. They probably don't have their act together on the inside of the organization. They don't have that feedback strategy. I have seen a lot of organizations who treat feedback as if it's this ad hoc thing or as if it's not part of the customer journey. To do this well, you need to understand your customer's journey and then kind of layer on the feedback journey on that and understand where and when and how you're gathering feedback and what you will do about it. Have an action plan before you ask those questions, because otherwise you are actually creating more negativity by just not responding, not closing the loop, all of those things. It happens again and again. So that's one piece of advice I would have.
I've got a quick comment and question from Justin, and I think this is one that I can actually answer. First, Justin says, absolutely love your weekly emails, and then asks, are these live sessions recorded and posted on YouTube? Yes, they are. Every live session that we have done pretty much since the beginning is available on YouTube. Here's a quick link, bit.ly/GenieYT. That'll take you to the whole archive. But I think we're close to 70 videos now that we've
Wow.
recorded live
Yeah.
sessions. Yeah.
We started this
So
kind of as a like, hey, it's 2020, the world is changing, we can't do
yeah,
anything, let's offer this. And we're here because you all keep showing up and giving us great ideas and content to cover. And it's really become a community and something we really, really look forward to. So thanks to everybody for being here.
yeah, and for the great questions as well. Speaking of
Mhm.
which, here is a question from Siat. We're setting up a research repository, and I want to establish one that serves more purposes than just user experience. I'm trying to bring in a wider taxonomy so everyone in the organization or more people in the organization can benefit from it. Do you have any suggestions
Oof.
for building this research repository?
Wow. First of all, what a cool project and
Yeah.
idea. Yeah, I'm not sure if I have great suggestions on how to do it. I can share a little bit about what I've seen. The um, the thing that I come back to again and again right now is that we don't have enough visibility, transparency for everybody in the organization when it comes to what we learn about customers. So, as you're setting that up, I would encourage you to think about the visibility of it. How can we make sure that the people who need to see this are included and have that access when they need it? I think a lot of organizations right now are struggling with centralizing data, with centralizing research of this type. So the more that you can centralize it, but then give access and visibility, that's what I would recommend. I think the challenge that we have sometimes is if we make it too detailed and segmented and structured, that's hard for people to grasp too. So if you find certain tidbits, ideas, anecdotes, share those. That can be really powerful in an education program like what we just talked about or internal communications. One of the things I've seen is that, when we talk about those mission moments, if we find great resources in in that research that we're doing with different customers and groups, that can be a great source for those mission moments that you want to share far and wide. So some people will really respond to the research side of things. Some people will really respond to kind of the more anecdotal, emotional side of things. So we want to make sure we're constantly talking about both. We're constantly sharing both. So I don't have a great, perfect, like how to answer here, but I would just say keep that in mind with visibility. How can you make sure that the right people have access to this information? And then also, what can you pull from that and share in a way that will, move people emotionally, share how we're delivering or not? And that can be very impactful as well. Good luck with that program and keep me posted. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, sounds ambitious.
Hmm.
We've got a couple questions from Sue, who's joining us on YouTube. Let's start with the one with the quick answer. Do you have a recommendation for good CX training for employees on LinkedIn? I'd love to have training be included in onboarding.
That's an easy one.
Yeah.
There are 4, different LinkedIn learning courses that I have on that platform. The first one is how to create a positive customer experience. That's really all about what is customer experience and how do you manage it. We have 2 journey mapping courses. The first one is an introduction. The second one is a case study in action, where you can really see how it's done. And then the fourth one we have is on service blueprinting. So there are a couple different options for you there, but the positive customer experience one is really an overview and something that I hope will work for what you're looking for. And there's how you find it.
And then another really interesting question as well. Can you provide guidance on the level or salary for bringing in a CX specialist? There are different levels, but if I'm starting out with somebody just to assist in driving the
Mhm.
CX, I know we've talked a lot about what to invest in CX, and this is, I think, an interesting, nuanced
Mhm.
variation on that question.
Yeah, well, I would say first of all, CX specialist can mean lots of different things. So I would not want to go into the salary discussion just because that can be different for different regions, different industries, all sorts of things. But what I will say is there is some good stuff out there about different roles and responsibilities and how to define those roles. The CXPA has a good resource on this if you're not part of that, the at cxpa.org. And actually, this is some content we've been working on for a while too, because we are really intrigued by how customer experience teams are changing. But I think the key here is when you talk about a customer experience specialist, just make sure you're getting really defined about what that means, because that could mean a basically somebody who's analyzing data, that can mean somebody who's setting up the feedback program, that can mean all sorts of different things. So just make sure you really define that. So I don't have a great answer for you because it's very nuanced and it's a little all over the map, frankly. But if you look at the CXPA and then if you reach out with questions, I'll do my best as well.
And I've got one more question that came in from the community earlier this week, but I think that it ties in a bit as we think about how much we want to spend on CX. This question asks, how do you manage CX as a small business with a limited or minuscule budget?
Mm. Uh,
How do
yeah,
you bootstrap CX?
this happens, right? We actually I believe we did a webinar on this. How do you make CX improvements with no budget? Because it comes up so much. So a couple things. One is making sure you understand the customer journey. That is number one. If you do nothing else, start there because that will provide those low-hanging fruit moments where you can literally say, "Oh my gosh, we could change that tomorrow." So you can do that through gathering feedback. There are different ways to do that, but there are low cost or no cost options in some cases. Also, journey mapping, it's a tool at your disposal. You can start doing that to really highlight where those changes are. And then, you know what? Be the voice of the customer in your organization. That's how you get investment. You start making sure that people understand, you know what? We are ready to, improve the customer journey here, and our customers would actually stay longer and spend more with us and all of those things. Be that voice, just keep beating that drum. And if you don't have a customer experience mission statement, if you don't have a customer experience success statement, those are two ways that you can really start articulating those things as well and connecting the dots between customer experience success and success for your organization. So that's where I would start. There are other ideas out there. I mean, some of the things we talked about today, start a book club, start something that really just gets people thinking about this in a different way and empower other people. There are CX champion programs where you get kind of volunteer ambassadors in different teams, different departments. You hold lunch and learns, you can do all sorts of things to really get people on board. But if we can find that webinar for you, we'll drop that in too. Or you can search for that on YouTube.
And I was able to find the one that I think you were talking about. It's
Oh,
called
good.
3 Steps to Improve Customer Experience, No Matter Your Budget or Title.
There you go.
So yeah, you can search that on YouTube. We've also got an article about that on our blog. If you prefer to
Mhm.
read, that's there as well. Great question, and some cool ideas on how to get people engaged without having to ask for a lot of their time or invest a lot.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's going to do it for this week's questions, but I want to thank everybody again for the great questions and for being here. It's great to be able to get together. We are doing this fortnightly, which I love. That's going to be my new way of describing this. It is
Excellent.
once a fortnight. Yeah, otherwise, Jeannie, where can folks find you in the meantime?
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for being here, for investing in your education, your learning, as well as sharing that with your organization. The mission of our company is to create fewer ruined days for customers. And by you being here, you are helping us live that mission. We love hearing from you. Reach out on these different platforms. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. That's a great place to follow and join those conversations that we're having there. And our blog as well at experienceinvestigators.com. And don't forget, you can sign up for that newsletter. We have one on LinkedIn as well. So you can find us a couple different ways. If you have ideas and suggestions for content that you want to see, we want to hear from you. So go ahead and let us know your ideas as well. But in the meantime, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great. And we hope to see you here in another 2 weeks. Thanks for being here, everybody.